Boilies are probably the most used carp fishing bait, and in this video we're going to look in detail at how best to use them to help you catch more carp. So what is a boilie? It's a man-made bait which is made from mostly a mix of flour, eggs, flavourings and colourings. It's formed into a dough, then rolled into balls, and then it's boiled, hence why it's called a boilie. Boilies come in so many different sizes, flavours and colours, it can be sometimes quite daunting to know what one to use, and in this video we're going to look at that a bit later. There's a number of reasons why so many anglers choose to use boilies. For starters, they are so user friendly, unlike particle baits or ground bait which you have to make in preparation for your session. Boilies can be simply bought from a tackle shop and then used right away, straight out the bag. Secondly, boilies are available in a number of different sizes. 10mm, 15mm and 20mm are the most common varieties to find. This can be helpful for us anglers because we can pick a size that will suit our fishing situation best. Say you're fishing for shy pressured carp, a 10mm boilie is a more subtle approach and will often work better than a large obtrusive bait. But on the other hand, if you're fishing a big water and you need to boilie stick out baits a really long way, then a 20mm sometimes is the only option. Bigger baits like 20mm sizes are also best when there's lots of fish like bream or roach or tench which may pick up smaller baits. So using a big bait can make sure that the carp is the only fish that will be able to pick it up in its mouth. Boilies are also very versatile and don't need to be used in their round form. They can be squeezed between your fingers to create a crumb, or you can use a tool like this, which means you can ground up a load at a time and you can actually form it into a ground bait. The options are endless with boilies, and that's why most carp anglers will use them at some point. But they come with their downsides too. For a kilogram of boilies, you're likely to spend around £10. So compared to corn, which you can pick up at the supermarket for about £1 for a kilo, that's a big price difference. That's why when I use boilies, I normally try to use them sparingly. Cheap baits like corn or particle are a lot more likely to get munched up by smaller species of fish, whereas boilies are slightly tougher and resist the attention of those smaller species of fish. Your choice of baiting will depend on your budget, but in most cases, if I want to pre-bait or put in quite a lot of loose feed, I'll use a mix of mainly corn, particle and pellet and cheaper stuff like that. But if you can add a few boilies to your mix, there's no harm in doing so, and I always find I feel very confident that there's always some bait there waiting for a carp that hasn't been munched by all the smaller species. There are a few fishing situations which we have found boilies to be necessary. In fact, a few years ago we were fishing a large reservoir which was absolutely full of bream. We tried a number of smaller baits and we simply couldn't get through to the carp because the bream were coming in, clearing us out of bait, and we were waking up a good few times throughout the night just to bream bites. The only way we could get around this was by using boilies, and big ones. We switched to 20mm boilies and instantly the bream bites stopped. We were getting a lot less of them and getting through to the carp again. So that's a prime example of when boilies can be necessary to catch carp. If you've decided that you'd like to give boilies a go, then you're soon going to realise that they come in so many different flavours and colours. This can be quite confusing to know what one will work best, which one to choose. But let me tell you, I've caught carp on all the different flavours I've ever used, even the freebies that you get on the front of a fishing magazine. If the carp are hungry, they will eat it. Over the years, however, I have realised there are a few properties that I look for when choosing a good quality boilie. I look for a bait which has a firm texture, but one that will break apart when squeezed with a little bit of pressure between my fingers. I like to use one that has perfect roundness. This is not always necessary, but if you'd like to use a boilie stick to bait up at longer range, then a bait which is perfectly round is kind of necessary for that. And I look for a boilie that has great smell, that I don't mind lingering around in my car or garage. After squeezing a boilie between my fingers, I'll soon realise if it's one I would like to use. A rock hard bait that won't break apart is going to be not easy to digest for a carp, but at the same time a bait which is really soft that just falls apart in your hand and breaks down too easily, once it comes in contact with water, that process will happen even quicker, and if you're using it as a hook bait, it's likely that it will have broken down and you'll reel in without a bait on. And if you're using it as loose feed, you'll throw it in as a ball and it will soon just break down on the bottom and won't be doing its job properly. When it comes to the flavour of boilie you choose, then that's complete personal preference, but I've had good results on all different flavours. These are the boilies which we've been using for the past couple of years. They have a really nice coconutty, creamy flavour, and I absolutely love the smell of them. I just have to be reminded that they are not for human consumption because they smell so good. The colour of the boilie is also worth considering. I like these because they're not too bright and they're not too dark. I worry that a bait which is too bright is quite obtrusive and easily spooks a wary carp, and also a bait which is too dark may just easily be ignored by a carp when it's just sat there on the bottom. So that's why I like the colour of these. When you come to buy a bag of boilies, you will realise that they either come as freezer bait or in shelf life bags. Freezer bait is fresher and is frozen once it's made at the bait factory. To store freezer bait, it should be kept in the freezer until the day before you fish. You can then take out the amount you need and keep it in an air dry bag like this. Using an air dry bag means that the bait can dry out and ensure that it doesn't go mouldy. Shelf life bait, on the other hand, contains preservatives, which means that you can keep it at room temperature and it won't go mouldy. Some anglers swear by using freezer bait. They believe that it not only catches more carp, but also is better for them, it's healthier for them. Other anglers, including us, don't really mind what we use. We've had good success on both, so that's completely up to you to decide. Now we're going to look at how to tie a really simple boilie rig. To tie this rig, you will need the following items. Some coated braid hook link material. This is 18-pound dark matter. A size 6 hook. A wide gape like this is our preferred pattern. A boilie for a hook bait. We are using a 15mm as this is a perfect size to match our size 6 hook. However, you can swap this out for a smaller or large bait. This is up to you. A pair of scissors, a baiting needle and a braid stripper tool will also come in handy. And don't forget bait stops to hold your hook bait in place. Take around 12 inches of braid off the spool. Next, you'll need to strip about 2 inches of the coating back using the stripper tool. Tie a small overhand loop in the strip back part of the braid. This will form your hair loop. Thread a boilie onto a baiting needle, then thread it onto the hair loop. Hold the bait in place with a bait stop. Take the other end of the braid and thread it through the eye of your hook. Make sure to thread it through the correct way so it ends up looking like this. Now you can set the length of your hair. I normally like to leave a small gap between the hook and the bait for a little natural movement. Now wrap the braid up round the shank of the hook about 7 to 10 times before threading the braid back through the eye. Pull the knot down tight. The hook and bait are now attached with a knotless knot. In the other end of the braid, tie an overhand loop knot. You can then attach this knot to the lead setup. We made a full video about lead setups. That video can be found on our channel. Here's the finished rig. Super simple, strong and reliable. This simple boilie rig can also be quickly converted into a pop-up rig. Do this by swapping the boilie for a pop-up, make a break in the coated braid about 1 inch from the hook and squeeze on a split shot to hold the pop-up down. This is how it looks in the water. The chod rig and stiff hinge rig are also great rigs to use in conjunction with boilies. We have videos about these rigs on our channel, so check out the description of this video for links to them. Next, we're going to look at how to loose feed boilies. Now, of course, for close range baiting, you can just use your hand. You can take a handful of boilies and throw them out over your rig. You could probably get a boilie maybe 20 yards, throwing it in by hand. But if you want to step it up and go a bit further, then you can use a catapult. A nice strong big catapult with strong elastic is great for putting out boilies. You can fill up the little pouch quite full. You can maybe fit 10, 15 baits in there and fire them out quite far, probably up to around 60 yards, depending on how strong your elastic is and how strong your arms are. And then if you want to go even further than that, you've got 2 options. Firstly, let's look at the ultimate boilie baiting tool, the boilie stick. It's basically a curved, hollow tube that you load with boilies to help you bait up at long distance. However, using one accurately isn't so easy. The first time I tried using a boilie stick, none of my bait went anywhere near where I intended it to go. But with a bit of practice, a boilie stick can be a useful tool for any carp angler. To start with, let's look at hand placement. A boilie stick can be used with either one or two hands. I find I can get maybe a little more distance using two hands, but this is personal preference. If using one hand, place it an inch or two away from the end of the grip. The reason for placing your hand here is so you can get maximum leverage when you swing the boilie stick. Holding the stick further up the grip means less leverage, and holding it any nearer the end means that you're in less control and you might lose grip. You can also use two hands for more power to get the boilies out further. This involves moving your dominant hand further up the grip and placing your other hand behind it. Try using a boilie stick with both methods and see what you prefer. Next, we're going to look at loading the stick with bait. Having a waste pouch makes this process way easier, and it means that you don't need to keep bending down each time to grab your bait. We normally use up to around 4 or 5 boilies at a time and still get good accuracy and distance. However, the more baits you put in the stick, the less accuracy you're going to get. I've tried it. I've tried loading the stick full to the brim with boilies. I must have put maybe 20 baits in and flinging it over, and none of them went anywhere near where I wanted them. So don't do that. It's also worth mentioning that 20mm baits fly a considerable amount further than 50mm, so if your aim is baiting up at extra long range, then using 20mm has a big advantage. Swinging a boilie stick is much like throwing a tennis ball or making a tennis serve. Try keeping your wrist stiff and just using the motion in your arms to throw the bait out. The first time you use a boilie stick, you might find that your baits are either flying way too high in the sky or way too low and hitting the water right in front of you. This is normal. It happened to me. I remember when I first did it, all my baits were hitting the water right in front of me and I was getting frustrated because they weren't going out where I wanted them. If that's the case, if your boilies are going way too high, then simply aim lower as if you're throwing that ball closer to the water surface, and on the other hand, if your baits are going too low and hitting the water close in front of you like mine did, then aim as if you're throwing that ball higher into the sky. It takes a bit of practice, but keep doing it because you will get better and you will become a pro at boilie sticking. If you are serious about getting extra long distance with boilie stick baiting, then it's probably worth looking at your stance and your foot placement. If you have a dominant right hand, then place your left foot in front of your right foot. Stand with your feet apart, and as you throw the boilie stick over, transfer your weight from your back foot all the way through to your front foot. With practice, a boilie stick can be a great tool for baiting up, but do be careful and watch out for other water users because boilies fly at extreme speeds when it comes out the boilie stick. Once I somehow managed to get a boilie into a canoe, so that was a close call. But yeah, just be careful where you aim them at. Lastly, you can use a Spomb to bait up. Now, a Spomb is a bait rocket in the shape of a bomb. As crazy as it might sound, you can fill these with boilies, close them shut. Tied to the end of your fishing rod, you cast it out. Upon impact with the water, it opens up and deposits bait on the lake bed. This can be a good tactic to use when baiting up at long range and you want to get accuracy. Compared to a boilie stick where boilies will be dotted around, a Spomb can be cast on the same spot every time and create a very tight area of baiting. As well as feeding whole boilies, you can of course crumb them up too. You can either crush them up within your fingers, but it's quicker and easier to use a tool like this. Once a boilie has been broken, it will release more smell and flavour into the water. It'll also sink down slower onto the lake bed and parts of the boilie will get stuck in the bottom substrate. This will keep the fish grubbing around for longer than if you were using whole boilies. The only issue with using crushed up boilies is that the smaller species will now be able to fit the bait inside their mouths, so bear this in mind before using crushed up baits. Crushing a few boilies up and loose feeding it over a few margin spots can be a great tactic during the spring and summer. Equally, crushed boilies are a great loose feed for winter fishing. Crush up 3 boilies and throw them into the water You'll be surprised at how much of a cloud this creates. A load of attraction without filling the fish up too much. Another way to incorporate boilies into your fishing is by making up small PVA bags. You can either use some boilie crumb in a PVA bag or just put a few whole boilies in, it's completely up to you. To tie a PVA bag, all you'll need is a tube of PVA and a pair of scissors. Take some boilie crumb and pour it into the tube. Take the compressor tool and push the crumb down to compact it, then push it out of the tube. Tie an overhand knot in the PVA to secure the bag in place, followed by another overhand knot next to the last. Cut between the knots and you have a PVA bag ready to hook onto your rig. As you can see in the tank, the PVA bag creates a perfect little patch of bait right around the rig. You can also make PVA stringers using a length of PVA tape like this and threading a few boilies on. This can then be attached to your rig and gives you a nice presentation with a few boilies right around your rig. To learn more about other great carp fishing baits, then click the video on screen now.